Sign it, barren bitch, or I break your jaw on this counter. His hand was already in my hair. My cheek was pressed against the cold granite of the island I'd picked out 3 years ago. The divorce papers were under my chin. A pen was in his other hand. It was 4:11 in the morning. I'm Marlowe Okafor. I was 36 years old. I had just buried my daughter 6 days earlier. Her name was Ife. She lived for 19 minutes. He pressed harder. My teeth cut the inside of my cheek. I tasted copper and the Merlot he'd been drinking since the funeral. You couldn't even keep one alive, he said. His voice was calm. That was the worst part. Sign. The paper. I signed the paper. My hand was shaking so bad the M in Marlowe looked like a toddler drew it. He let go. He walked to the fridge. He poured a glass of orange juice and drank it standing up, watching me crawl off the counter. Then he said, "Be out by Sunday. Your stuff's in the garage already." 6 minutes later, he was asleep on the couch. 6 hours later, I was at Hennepin County ER with a hairline fracture of my mandible and a nurse named Delphine writing down every word I said while a cop photographed my face from 4 different angles. And the thing he didn't know? The thing Grayson Pelletier, pillar of the Minneapolis Bar Association, big donor, charming dimpled bastard, did not know? I'm a divorce lawyer. I've been a divorce lawyer for 11 years, and my paralegal had been backing up his phone to a cloud drive for 9 months. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why, by October of that year, a Hennepin County judge was reading Grayson's own text messages out loud in a courtroom while his mother sobbed in the third row. You need to know how we got there. You need to know about Ife. You need to know about Celeste. And you need to know about my grandfather, who used to say one thing to me over and over at the kitchen table in St. Paul. So let me start there. My name is Marlowe Okafor. In the early 2020s, I was living in a 4 bedroom house in the Linden Hills neighborhood of Minneapolis with my husband Grayson, my 2 rescue dogs, and for 19 minutes, my daughter. My dad was Nigerian, an anesthesiologist who came to Minnesota in the 70s and never left. My mom was a white woman from Duluth who taught fourth grade for 31 years and made the best lefse you've ever tasted in your life. They were gone by the time I was 30. Dad from a stroke, mom from pancreatic cancer 18 months later. My older brother Tobias lives in Portland with his husband and runs a bakery. We talk every Sunday. He's important later, but the most important person in my childhood was my grandfather on my mother's side. His name was Alvar Lindbergh. He was a retired Sioux Line Railroad engineer. Big hands, quiet voice, smelled like Old Spice and pipe smoke. I want to linger on that kitchen for a second because that kitchen is where this whole story actually starts. It was a narrow galley kitchen in a bungalow on Edmond Avenue in St. Paul, with yellow formica counters worn soft at the corners and a red enamel kettle that ticked when it cooled. The linoleum had a burn mark shaped like a comma where my grandmother had dropped a curling iron in 1974. Alvar kept a jar of apple slices in cold water on the counter so they wouldn't brown, and when he pulled one out for me, it smelled sharp and clean, like the first cold morning of October. The house always smelled like 3 things layered on top of each other: pipe smoke from the porch, coffee that had been on the burner too long, and that Old Spice from the green bottle on the bathroom shelf. He used to pick me up from school on Thursdays because my parents both worked late, and we'd sit at that table and he'd cut up an apple with a paring knife he'd owned since before I was born, and he'd say the same thing every time I told him about a problem. Marlowe, he'd say, people show you their hand. You just have to be willing to see it. That's the quote. Remember it. It matters. I went to the University of Minnesota for undergrad, then William Mitchell for law school. I went into divorce law for the least romantic reason in the world. My first boss out of school did family law. He had a spot. He paid me. But it stuck. I liked the work. I was good at it. By the time I met Grayson, I was a senior partner at Voss, Ramirez, and Okafor. 3 names on the door. Mine was the last one. Here's the thing about being a divorce lawyer you should know. It doesn't make you cynical about love, the way people assume. It makes you obsessive about documentation. I have a trait that, in my profession, looks like competence, but is actually a compulsion. I save everything: every text, every voicemail, every receipt, every email. I have a cloud drive with 11 years of case adjacent correspondence on it, and I have a personal one with 14 years of my own life. My therapist calls it a trauma response. My paralegal calls it job security. I call it habit. That habit is why I'm not dead. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. I met Grayson Pelletier at a continuing legal education seminar at the Depot in Minneapolis in 2017. He was a real estate attorney at a boutique firm, 38, divorced once, no kids. He had these specific dimples that only showed up when he was lying, though I didn't know that yet. He bought me a whiskey sour and said, "I've been trying to talk to you for 2 hours. You keep getting pulled into conversations." I said, "That's called networking." He said, "That's called you being the most interesting person in this room." Reader, I was 32 and lonely. I fell for it. We got married in the fall of 2018 at a small ceremony on the North Shore. His sister Celeste was his best person. My brother Tobias walked me down the aisle because Dad was already gone. Celeste hugged me at the reception and said, "I've always wanted a sister." Welcome to the family, you beautiful thing. Celeste was a nurse practitioner at Abbott Northwestern. 34, sharp cheekbones, laughed like a crow. She and I got close fast, closer than I'd ever been with a female friend in my adult life. We did brunch every Saturday at a place called Tilia in Linden Hills. She always ordered the same thing: poached eggs on grilled sourdough, a thick cut that soaked up the yolk. And she'd lean across the table and steal a strip of bacon off my plate with 2 fingers, the way a sister would, the way I'd always wanted someone to do. We went to bar class together on Tuesday mornings, and afterward the studio would fill with the smell of eucalyptus spray and wet cotton and her vanilla perfume, which was sweet and thick and stayed on my scarf for a day after. She was the first person I told when I got pregnant in the spring of 2020. Remember her name? Celeste Pelletier. The pregnancy was rough from week 1. I threw up until the middle of the second trimester. I was in and out of the high risk clinic at Abbott because of blood pressure. Grayson came to the first ultrasound, cried, bought me a onesie that said mini lawyer. He came to the second ultrasound and scrolled Instagram the whole time. He did not come to the third. I told myself he was busy. He was closing on a commercial property in St. Louis Park. His firm was understaffed. All the things a woman tells herself when the man she married starts to leave the room. At 26 weeks, my blood pressure spiked to 178 over 112, and I was admitted for preeclampsia. Celeste came every single day. She brought me soup from Revival. She brushed my hair. She held my hand when the specialist told me that I might not make it to 30 weeks. Grayson came on day 4. He stayed 11 minutes. He said, "I have a deposition," and he left. At 29 weeks and 2 days, I delivered Ive by emergency C-section at 3:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in September. She weighed 2 pounds, 11 ounces. She had my dad's nose. She had Grayson's ears. She lived for 19 minutes on the warmer while the NICU team did everything a human team can do. Grayson arrived 40 minutes after she died. He smelled like cologne I didn't recognize and red wine. He sat in the chair next to my bed and said, "Well, at least we can try again." I didn't cry. Not then. I just looked at the ceiling tile that had a brown water stain shaped like Wisconsin, and I thought, something is very wrong with this man. That was the first flag. It had been there for months, of course. The phone flipped face down during dinner. The sudden new cologne, sandalwood, and something green underneath. Not the bergamot I'd bought him for Christmas. The gym membership he joined at a place 32 minutes from our house when there was an Anytime Fitness 9 blocks away. The way he stopped touching my belly. But grief makes you forgive things. So I forgave. We buried Ive on a Saturday. The viewing was at Washburn McCreevy Funeral Chapel on Dupont Avenue. It was small. My brother, a few of my partners, Grayson's mother, and Celeste. The chapel smelled like lilies pushed past their peak. That heavy, sweet rot smell that means someone you love is in a box in the room. The carpet was maroon and thick enough that footsteps didn't make a sound. There was a water cooler in the corner that glugged every 90 seconds, a hollow wet bubble, and I remember being grateful for it because it was the only noise breaking the silence. Celeste wore a black wrap dress and sensible heels. She held me for a long time in the receiving line and whispered, "She was perfect, Marlowe. She was so perfect." Then she walked away from me, across the viewing room, and she kissed my husband on the mouth. It was 3 seconds. It was quick. It was in a corner, near the water cooler, and she turned her face into his like she'd done it 100 times before, because she had. I was standing by my daughter's tiny white casket. I watched it happen. My brother Tobias was beside me. He saw it too. He didn't say anything. He just put his hand on my lower back and pressed, hard, like he was holding me upright, which he was. That was the moment Alvar Lindbergh's voice came back into my head. People show you their hand. You just have to be willing to see it. I was willing. Finally. I went home that night, and I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not confront him. I made him a bourbon. I kissed his cheek. I said I was exhausted, and I went upstairs to the guest bedroom where I'd been sleeping since the C-section. I closed the door. I opened my laptop, and I started the clock. The first thing I did was text my paralegal. Her name is Rika Sorensen. She's Danish, 41, 2 kids, and she is the most terrifyingly efficient human being I have ever met. I texted her at 11:48 p.m. on a Saturday. Rika, Monday morning. Need to talk. Personal, urgent. Bring your laptop. She responded in 31 seconds. Coffee or whiskey? Both, I wrote back. On Monday morning at 7:45 a.m., Rika sat down across from me in my office with a thermos of coffee and a mini Jameson bottle she keeps in her desk for clients who are having, as she calls it, a Tuesday. I told her what Grayson had said in the hospital, what I'd seen at the funeral, the cologne, the gym, the face-down phone. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Okay, what's his iPhone password?" I told her. It was Ive's due date. She said, "Oh, Marlo, oh, honey, here's what I learned over the next 6 weeks. Grayson and Celeste had been sleeping together since the summer of 2019. That's 4 months before he proposed to me in Cabo. No, that's not right. He proposed to me in Cabo in October of 2019. They started in August of 2019. He proposed to me while he was already sleeping with his sister. I know what you're thinking. Wait, his sister? Celeste was not his biological sister. Grayson had been adopted out of foster care at age 7 by the Pelletiers. Celeste was their biological daughter, born 2 years before. He'd told me this on our third date, and also told me it didn't matter, they were family, full stop. And I'd said, "Of course," which is what you say, it mattered. They had 437 text messages on a burner phone Grayson kept in the glove box of his Lexus. Rika found it because Grayson, genius that he is, had a habit of texting Celeste from the burner, while his regular iPhone was synced to our shared iCloud family plan. And the location pings matched. She mapped his movements against Celeste's for 6 months. 94% overlap when he said he was at the gym. The texts were graphic. The texts were also something worse than graphic. They were strategic. In one message, dated 11 days before I was admitted for preeclampsia, Celeste wrote to him, "How long are you going to do this for? She's never going to carry to term. Her blood pressure is already elevated. Just end it." Grayson wrote back, "There's a prenup clause. If I leave in year 3, I get the house and nothing else. Year 5, I get $178,500 from her retirement. Let her lose this one. Then I'll pull the plug. Let her lose this one." I read those words at 2:14 a.m. on a Wednesday, sitting in my guest bed, with Grayson snoring down the hall. And I did something I hadn't done since my mother's funeral. I opened my mouth, and I screamed into a pillow for 90 seconds. And then I got up, and I made tea. Because Alvar was right. People show you their hand. You just have to be willing to see it. And now I'd seen it. And now it was my turn. The next 6 weeks were the quietest, busiest weeks of my life. I went to work. I smiled at Grayson. I ate dinner with him. I let him touch my shoulder, which is the only place he'd touched me since the C-section. I made polite small talk with Celeste at the 2 family events we had during that period, one of which was Grayson's mother's birthday dinner at Manny's Steakhouse downtown, where Celeste wore a necklace I'd complimented to Grayson the month before. I wondered briefly if he'd bought it for her with my Amex. Reka confirmed by Thursday that yes, he had. $814 at Dana Pearl Jewelry on Hennepin. Meanwhile, here is what Rika and I built. 1. A complete forensic copy of the burner phone, obtained legally through a process I will not bore you with, but which involved a private investigator named Odin Thorvaldsen, a Best Buy in Roseville, and a replacement phone he bought to swap out during a 6-minute window when Grayson was getting a car wash. Rika is, as I said, terrifyingly efficient. 2. Bank records. Grayson had been siphoning money from our joint account into a separate checking account at a credit union in Edina for 2 years. The total as of that October was $178,500, the exact amount from the prenup clause. He was, with the methodical patience of a man who did real estate law, replicating the payout he would have gotten if he'd left me in year 5. Except he was taking it now, in cash, while staying married to me. So when the divorce came, he'd get that amount again. 3. The hospital records from my delivery. I requested my own file. I read every page. There was a note from an on-call nurse who was not Celeste, but who documented that a visitor identifying herself as the patient's sister-in-law, LPN, had attempted to adjust my magnesium drip at 1:14 a.m. on the night of the delivery and was told by the charge nurse to step away from the pump. Celeste was not an LPN. Celeste was an NP, and she was not authorized to touch my medication. The charge nurse, a woman named Bernadette Quist, had flagged it in the electronic record. I called Bernadette. She remembered. She was willing to testify. Let me say that again. My husband's mistress/adoptive sister had tried to adjust my magnesium drip while I was in labor with a baby they had already agreed to let die. 4. The text messages, all 437, printed, bound, exhibit tabbed, and locked in a safe at my office. 5. A witness list. My brother Tobias, Bernadette Quist, the bartender at the Lowe's Hotel downtown who had served Grayson and Celeste on 11 separate occasions. Celeste's ex-boyfriend, a man named Porter Rask, who'd broken up with her in 2019 because, quote, she told me she was in love with her brother. 6. A filing, drafted but not filed, sitting in Rika's second drawer. And then Grayson did something that accelerated everything. Actually, 2 things. I want to tell you about the first one, because I haven't told anyone this part, and it matters. 3 nights before the Joe, he sat down across from me at our dining room table with a glass of Merlot and a look I'd never seen on his face before. Flat. Evaluating. The way an appraiser looks at a house he's about to lowball. He said, Marlo, do you think you'd ever try again? For a kid. I said, Grayson, it's been 5 days. He said, I am asking because I need to know if this marriage has a future. I need to know if you're going to keep being this. This, he said, like I was a leak in the ceiling. I said, being what? He said, soft. Checked out. You don't laugh anymore. You don't cook. You don't even put on lipstick. I married a woman who walked into a room and owned it. And now I come home and you're just on the couch. My daughter, I said, has been dead for 5 days. He drank his wine. He said, other women bounce back. I smiled at him. I can still feel that smile on my face. It felt like somebody else's mouth. I said, you're right. I'll work on it. And I went upstairs and I opened my laptop and I emailed Rika at 11:52 p.m. and I wrote one sentence. Accelerate everything. He is not stable. I don't think I have much time. Rika wrote back at 11:53. Already on it. Lock your bedroom door. I locked my bedroom door. 3 nights later, on the night of October the 14th, he came home from what he said was a work dinner. It was 4:11 in the morning. I was awake because I had been awake most nights since I've. He was drunk. He was angry. He had, I learned later, just had an argument with Celeste about why he hadn't left me yet. He threw the divorce papers on the kitchen island. He said, sign these. Now. I said, Grayson, it's 4 in the morning. We can talk tomorrow. He said, we are not going to talk tomorrow. We are going to talk right now. You know what today is? Today is the day I decided I am done. I am done coming home to a woman in a bathrobe. I am done pretending I give a shit about a baby that was never going to make it. Sign the fucking papers, Marlo. I said, Grayson, please. That's when he grabbed my hair and slammed my face onto the granite. You know what he said. Sign it, Baron Beach, or I break your jaw on this counter. And I did, because my jaw was already cracking, because I wanted to live, because by that point, my signature on his rigged divorce papers was the least of his problems. I just didn't tell him that. After he passed out on the couch, I went to the bathroom. I took 17 photos of my face with timestamps. I emailed them to Rika, to Tobias, to myself, and to my other law partner Soraya Ramirez. I drove to Hennepin County ER. I gave a statement to Officer Naima Kaur. I let them photograph me. I let Nurse Delphine document it in the medical record, which I legally could not destroy or alter. And then at 9:14 a.m., on the morning of October 15th, Rika filed, not just for divorce, for an emergency order of protection, and this was the part Grayson did not see coming, a motion to admit the burner phone text chain as Exhibit A in a criminal referral to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office for conspiracy to commit negligent homicide against our daughter. That referral would not survive. The threshold for that charge is brutal, and a prosecutor would never bring it. But that wasn't the point. The point was the motion. The point was that the text chain would be in the public court record. The point was what happened on November the 7th at 10:30 a.m. in courtroom 1841 of the Hennepin County Government Center in front of Judge Aurelia Broussard with Grayson sitting on one side, his mother and Celeste behind him, me on the other side, and my brother Tobias in the row behind me, with Rika at my right hand, with a binder of exhibits on the table. Grayson's attorney was a man named Heath Varga, a decent lawyer who looked like he had not slept in 4 days. He had not. I knew this because I'd been opposing counsel to Heath twice, and we'd had coffee once. I liked Heath. Heath was about to have the worst morning of his professional life. Judge Broussard opened the hearing. Grayson was wearing a navy suit. He was smirking. Celeste was holding his mother's hand. Grayson's mother, a woman named Brigitte, looked at me and mouthed the words, "You're a disgrace." I said nothing. I did not look at her. I looked at Rika. Rika nodded. The motion was read into the record. Heath objected. Judge Broussard overruled. Heath objected again. Judge Broussard said, "Mr. Varga, you have been overruled. Sit down." And then she started reading, out loud, in open court, the text messages. She started with the tame ones, the logistical ones, the meet me at the hotel ones. And I watched Grayson's mother's face. It didn't change at first. She thought. I could see her thinking, okay, an affair, we can manage an affair, we are pelletiers. Then Judge Broussard got to message number 2, 1-1, let her lose this one, then I'll pull the plug. I want to tell you what that moment felt like, because I've been asked about it 100 times, and I've never been able to answer honestly. I thought I would feel triumph. I had rehearsed the triumph. I had walked through the courtroom in my head at 3 a.m. for 4 weeks, imagining how I'd hold my face, how I'd keep my shoulders square, how I'd let the words land on him without letting a single muscle in my cheek move. I had prepared for victory the way you prepare for a closing argument, line by line, breath by breath. I did not feel triumph. What I felt was quiet, a strange, wide, flat quiet, like the second after a glass hits the floor and before anyone moves. I could hear the ventilation system. I could hear someone's pen click in 2 rows behind me. I could hear the small wet sound of Brigitte Pelletier swallowing. I thought, oddly, of the enamel kettle on my grandfather's stove, the way it ticked as it cooled. Tick, tick, tick. And I thought, he would have hated this. Alvar would have hated every second of this. He would not have been proud. He would have been sad, in the way quiet men get sad. And he would have cut me an apple, and he would have said nothing, and that silence would have been the kindest thing anyone had ever given me. And then I thought about Ive. I thought about 19 minutes. I thought about the weight of her. 2 pounds, 11 ounces, which is less than a bag of sugar, less than a paperback novel, less than the casserole dish my mother used to bring to church potlucks. I thought about how her whole life fit inside a song you could hum on the drive home from the grocery store, a song that ended before you got to the driveway. And I understood, sitting there in that courtroom, that I was not doing this for revenge. I was not doing this to ruin him. I was doing this because my daughter had existed for 19 minutes, and the only person in the world who was ever going to say her name out loud in a public record, on the record, for the state of Minnesota to hear, was me. This was her obituary. This was her headstone. The words of the people who killed her, read in a voice that did not shake, by a judge who did not know her. Brigitte Pelletier's face went the color of skim milk. Her hand let go of Celeste's hand. She turned slowly, slowly, and she looked at her daughter. And Celeste, for the first time in the 45 minutes I had been watching her, looked down at the floor. Judge Broussard kept reading. Message 247, Message 301, Message 348, in which Celeste wrote, "I'm going to be on shift that night. I can handle the mag drip if she gets admitted." Bridget stood up. She walked out of the courtroom. She did not look at Grayson. She did not look at Celeste. The door closed behind her with a small, quiet click that I will remember until I am an old woman. Grayson's smirk was gone. His hands were shaking on the defense table. Heath Varga put his hand on Grayson's arm and whispered something. Grayson shook it off. Judge Broussard finished reading. She took off her glasses. She folded them. She set them down on the bench with a small, deliberate click, the same click as the door, the same click as the kettle. She looked over the empty space where her glasses had been, at Grayson, and she said, "Mr. Pelletier, I am granting the order of protection. I am granting the emergency divorce petition. I am freezing all joint assets, including the $178,500 held at Wings Credit Union in Edina, which, I note, represents the exact amount your prenuptial agreement would have paid to your spouse in year 5 of a mutual dissolution, and which you appear to have withdrawn in increments over 22 months. I am referring this text chain and the associated hospital records to the Hennepin County attorney and to the Minnesota Board of Nursing regarding Miss Celeste Pelletier. Mrs. Okafor, do you have anything to add?" I stood up. My jaw was still wired on the left side. I could talk, but it was slow. I said, "No, Your Honor. Thank you. That's it." That was my 10 words. I sat down. Grayson looked at me across the courtroom. His eyes were wet. He opened his mouth. I turned my head and I looked at Rika instead. And Rika, God bless her, winked. Within 2 weeks, Celeste Pelletier was suspended from Abbott Northwestern pending investigation. Within 4 weeks, her NP license was restricted. Within 6 weeks, she was charged with a count of professional misconduct that will, if it sticks, end her career. Within 8 weeks, Grayson's firm had quietly asked him to resign. Brigitte Pelletier never spoke to either of them again. She called me on a Thursday in December. She said, "Marlo, I want you to know. My husband and I, we tried. We loved him like our own. But what he did, what she did, I don't have a son. I don't have a daughter. I have nothing." I said, "Brigitte, I'm sorry." She said, "Don't be sorry. You did what we should have seen. Your grandfather? Did you ever tell me about your grandfather? The railroad man?" I said, "Alvar." She said, "Alvar was right. People show you their hand." I don't know how she knew that quote. I think I said it at Thanksgiving once, and she remembered. That's the thing about grief and attention. You find out, late, who was actually listening. Grayson tried to contact me twice. The first time was a voicemail, 3 weeks after the hearing. He said, "Marlo, I know I messed up. I was in a dark place. The baby? Us? I need you to talk to me." I forwarded it to Officer Corr as a violation of the protective order. He got a warning. The second time was a letter, a real letter, handwritten on yellow legal paper, dropped in my mailbox at the office. It said, "I loved you. In my own way. I did love you. I did not respond." I shredded it. Rika and I shredded it together at 5:15 p.m. on a Friday, and then we went to Constantine downtown and we ordered martinis. And Rika said, "To your grandfather." "To Alvar," I said. "To Ife," she said. And I did cry then. For the first time since I'd screamed into a pillow. I cried for 11 minutes in a downtown cocktail bar while a bartender named Julienne pretended not to notice and refilled my water. Here is my life now. I moved out of the Linden Hills house. I sold it in the spring. The $178,500 was returned to me in full by court order, plus his half of the proceeds of the house, which I donated every dollar to the NICU at Abbott Northwestern in Ife's name. There's a plaque now near the warmer where she died. It says, for Ife, Oka for Pelletier. Who was here? I bought a small bungalow in the Powderhorn neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, a yard, a kitchen with no granite in it. I had the island torn out and replaced with reclaimed wood from a barn in Stearns County. I kept the dogs. I got a third one, a senior rescue with 3 legs named Sol. I went back to work. I took a leave in the new year and I traveled. The thing I'd always wanted to do. The dream I put on hold when I married Grayson. I went to Lagos for 3 weeks and met my father's family. I sat in a kitchen in a town called Enugu with an aunt I'd never met named Ngozi, and she held my hand and she said, your daughter, she is with your father. You know this. I said, I know. She said, your grandfather too? I said, a different grandfather. On the other side, a man named Alvar. She said, then she has 2 grandfathers. She is very well looked after. I am 37 now. I live alone. I am not lonely. I take my dogs for a walk every morning around Powderhorn Lake, and I watch the sun come up over the water, and I think about what Alvar told me at his kitchen table over apple slices when I was 8 years old. People show you their hand, you just have to be willing to see it. I was willing, finally, and that, I think, is the only revenge worth having. Not the ruin of the people who hurt you, though, yes, they were ruined, and yes, I watched, and yes, it was sweet. The real revenge is the willingness itself, the willingness to see, the willingness to save everything, the willingness to walk out of a courtroom with your jaw wired shut and a judge reading your husband's own words into the record and to turn your head, not toward him, but toward the woman at your right hand who has been with you the whole time. Rika is still my paralegal. She got a raise. Tobias comes to Minneapolis every second weekend. We make lefse, badly. And on the Tuesday that would have been Ive's third birthday, I sat on my back porch with Sol on my lap, and I drank coffee from a mug that said Mini Lawyer, and I watched the morning come, and I did not cry. I laughed instead. Small, just once. The first laugh in a long time that didn't hurt. That one was for her.